I am a 34-year-old man named Daniel Cooper, middle child of three, but if you asked anyone at the dinner table growing up, they would swear I did not exist. Ethan, my older brother by 2 years, could set the house on fire, and mom would hand him a trophy for being creative. Megan, the youngest, learned early that applause belonged to Ethan, and crumbs belonged to anyone smart enough to align themselves with him. I was the kid who did chores without being asked, the one who came home before curfew, the one who paid for things instead of asking for them. That earned me a pat on the back on a good day and visibility on every other. I used to think being responsible meant being appreciated. Turns out it really just made me a convenient background character in the story of my own family. Ethan was born coated in golden paint. He was the one with the football scholarship that never materialized but was always talked about like it had. Prom king, life of the party, the Cooper family cornerback of God's affection. He failed classes and teachers said he had potential. I aced classes and teachers said good for you. He broke mom's car at 17 and everyone laughed about teenage freedom. I once scratched the coffee table and got grounded for a week and lectured about responsibility. People tell these stories like family folklore, but living them felt less like comedy and more like slow erosion. After high school, I worked. Construction with dad in the mornings, community college at night, warehouse jobs in between. I saved, stacked cash, bought my first car outright at 21, a faded blue Civic with 2 dents and a personality. Dad patted the hood and said, "Good, now pull your weight like Ethan did with football." Football. The one thing Ethan barely put effort into but somehow remained a medal around his neck long after graduation. I stopped trying to compete with a ghost of potential and started building something real. Logistics did not sound sexy at Thanksgiving dinners, but I liked problem solving, moving pieces that mattered, seeing numbers respond to effort. Ethan drifted after college like a balloon someone forgot to tie. Odd jobs, bragging rights, charm where skill should have been. A family friend pulled strings and suddenly he was at my company. Same department, same floor, same break room microwave. He treated like it personally wronged him. I kept my head down, built systems, improved efficiency, built a reputation quietly the way some people build muscle. Ethan built stories, loud ones. The Sunday dinner that changed everything was like every other until it wasn't. Mom asked how work was going. I told her I had been offered senior operations, paperwork pending, but solid. Megan blinked like she misheard. Dad nodded once. Mom smiled politely, but her eyes flicked to Ethan like she was waiting for his scorecard. Ethan froze. The confident grin he wore like cologne stiffened, cracked. He said he deserved that promotion, that he was the real face of the team, that I was riding his wave. I laughed because denial has a certain comedy if you are finally on the outside of it. He leaned closer, voice low enough that only I heard, and told me that if I did not step aside, he would make sure I regretted it. His fork clinked against his plate like punctuation. I did not react. Not because I was scared, but because I was planning. He started slow. Files were misplaced, inventory mismatched, reports edited just enough to look like my oversight. Small smears, irritating at first, then reckless. He sent emails to management claiming I mishandled shipments even though the metrics showed the opposite. He logged into restricted systems under his own username like he thought intent evaporated if no one looked directly at it. I saved everything, every timestamp, every log, every blurred attempt at sabotage. Screenshots filled folders, security footage confirmed access. The more he pushed, the quieter I worked. Resolve feels like steel when you stop asking for fairness. Promotion day came. They called us in together, long glass table, cold conference room, 2 seats too close for comfort. Ethan swaggered in like applause followed him indoors. I placed my folder on my lap and waited. The director said Ethan had expressed concerns about my competence, and Ethan smiled like victory was already framed. I slid the evidence across the table. Emails, logs, security reports, footage tagged with his credentials. The room shifted. HR went silent in that heavy way people do when truth lands like a brick. Ethan tried to explain, but his excuses tangled like fishing line. There is no graceful way to deny fingerprints on every weapon you fired. The promotion was mine. Not because I beat him, but because he never deserved the race. He was demoted to warehouse shifts, steel-toe boots, cold loading docks at 5 in the morning. The golden boy picking pallets in fluorescent light while I finalized supply expansion plans 2 floors up. When Mom heard she accused me of humiliation, said I should protect my brother instead of expose him. Protect him. The son who tried to bury me to save his reflection. Dad stayed quiet, eyes on the floor like he had finally realized the portrait of fairness everyone pretended existed was just paint over rot. Megan looked like she questioned every birthday candle she ever spent, wishing Ethan success. I drove home afterward with a calm that felt earned. Not revenge, not victory, just balance finally tipping toward the center for the first time in my life. And that night, as I lay in bed, the silence did not feel empty. It felt like space I finally owned. The fallout did not end there. Ethan lasted a grand total of 11 days in the warehouse before he blew out like a fuse. Word trickled back to me that he argued with a shift lead about break schedules, threw his gloves down, and marched off the dock swearing the company did not deserve him. He walked straight into unemployment with the same confidence he once walked into football tryouts. No plan, no accountability, just indignation wrapped in entitlement. 2 nights later, Mom declared what she called an emergency family meeting. She set the dining table like someone staging a peace treaty, but the tension felt more like a courtroom. She announced that I needed to apologize, that I had embarrassed Ethan, that I should call management and explain I overreacted, that they should bring him back in a real position that reflected his talent. I sat there feeling the same familiar pressure from childhood, pushing down on my ribs like hands trying to fold me back into shape. I told her I was not undoing consequences he built with his own hands. She said I was heartless. Before I could respond, Dad muttered that Ethan should not have risked his job over jealousy. His voice was quiet, but it cracked through the room like thunder. It was the first time in my entire life I heard Dad step onto my side of anything. The room went still. Ethan glared like betrayal itself had taken Dad's seat. Megan's eyes widened like she was witnessing a rewrite of family law. Mom ignored Dad's comment entirely, as if acknowledging it might shatter the story she'd been polishing for decades. The meeting ended not with resolution, but with silence so thick the chairs felt heavier when we stood. Within a week, Ethan moved back home. Mom treated the house like a nest built for a broken wing, tiptoeing around him, asking if he needed anything, defending his every complaint like a lawyer on retainer. He sat in the living room from noon to night, lights off, blinds drawn, playing video games while half-eaten takeout gathered on end tables. He said the world was unfair, that people did not see his worth, that life kept kicking him down. I heard these lines like reruns, same script, new season. I went to work, I solved problems. Orders moved smoother, metrics tightened, logistics tightened with them. I started training newer teams, connecting departments that used to trip over each other. The company noticed. They promoted me again, project coordination lead. I walked into my parents' house that Sunday with this news tucked in my pocket like something precious but fragile. Mom barely looked away from Ethan long enough to ask how work was. I told her the promotion came through. Her face did not change. She nodded once and focused back on Ethan, who was complaining that the internet speed was slow. No congratulations, no small smile, not even a mug raised in acknowledgement. I felt nothing sharp, no disappointment, no sting. Just a quiet shift inside me like a door closing softly. The room no longer felt like home. My success no longer needed their spotlight to exist. I drove away that night with steady hands and air that tasted clean. I did not care anymore. 3 weeks after the fallout at the house, Megan showed up at my apartment without warning. She looked like she had run there instead of driven. Hair unbrushed, eyes red, sweater sleeves pulled over shaking hands. She clutched her phone so hard the edges dug into her knuckles. Her voice was thin, like it was trying to be strong but collapsing under its own weight. She said Ethan borrowed her credit card temporarily, swearing it was just until unemployment processed. Just for groceries, just to get back on his feet. She believed him, because trusting Ethan was muscle memory. Then she opened her statement and saw $3,800 in charges. Not rent, not utilities, not even food. It was gaming add-ons, late-night food deliveries, digital upgrades, avatar skins, microtransactions labeled with names that looked like slot machine bait. Dragon Gem Bundle, Platinum XP Skip, Premium Loot Access. She said she tried to confront him, but he laughed it off, said he deserved comfort, said life was hard and she should be grateful she could help. She said every time she raised her voice, Mom swooped in, defending him like Ethan was glass and responsibility was a hammer. She stood there in my living room and told me she was scared, not of him yelling, but of losing herself to the habit of enabling him forever. That hit harder than anything else ever had. She wasn't just tired, she was done. We drove to our parents' house the next evening. The place felt different, quiet in a way that wasn't peace, but caution. The living room was dark except for the cold blue light of Ethan's gaming monitor, the same one purchased using Megan's credit line, the irony pulsing like a bruise. Ethan was sprawled on the couch, controller in hand, posture loose and confident, like the world still bent naturally around him. He looked up with that smirk, the one he wore whenever boundaries approached, as though they were suggestions, not lines. Megan started speaking before I could. Her voice was steady in shape, but shaking under it. A sheet of ice over deep water. She told him he had 1 week to pay her back. He leaned back further like her words were air and he was above needing to breathe. He laughed, dismissing her pain like it was exaggerated comedy, saying she owed him for rides years ago, for favors he hadn't actually done, for loyalty she supposedly inherited at birth. Megan stared at him like she didn't recognize the man speaking. The golden brother mask slipped, and under it was someone who believed he was untouchable. I stepped forward and told him, unemployment does not erase debt, and workplace sabotage leaves a trail employers can smell from a mile away. I felt no anger, just exhaustion, like repeating truth to someone unwilling to hear it. Ethan's expression snapped, pride flaring, and he stood too close, shoulders tense, jaw locked. He shoved me, and not enough to hurt, just enough to say I was supposed to fold the way I always had. My body didn't move. And Dad, the man who spent our whole childhood balancing peace over fairness, stepped between us. He told Ethan to pack a bag and leave the house. The quiet in the room shattered. I had never heard my father speak like that. Not to Ethan, not to anyone. The words were clean, final, like they had been building behind his teeth for years and finally broke free. Ethan stared at him like the laws of physics had changed. Mom started crying loudly, saying Dad was being cruel, saying Ethan needed support, protection, forgiveness. But Dad didn't flinch. His voice didn't shake. He looked at his son like a man recognizing a truth too long ignored, that love without boundaries becomes permission to destroy everything around you. Ethan stood frozen until Dad repeated himself. No yelling, no threat, just consequence. Ethan grabbed a backpack, hands trembling this time, stuffing clothes and tangled wires without folding or thinking. He looked to Mom for rescue, the same look he'd used his entire life. But she only cried, not moving to shield him. That single moment, that lack of intervention, weighed more than any argument ever could. I drove Megan home afterward. She was quiet but not fragile, more like someone walking out of a burning building and realizing oxygen exists. Her hands steadied mile by mile. She stared out the window like she was watching an old world fall behind her. When I pulled into her driveway, she hugged me tight. A kind of hug that didn't ask for fixing, only acknowledged that a wall finally broke. Later, I drove home alone. The road was dark but somehow wider, like there was space where suffocation used to be. The house lights faded behind me, and for the first time, it felt like a cycle cracked. Not ended, but shifting. Ethan stood in that doorway earlier with a half-zipped backpack and no script. For the first time in his life, he had to step off the pedestal and into the world like everyone else. That night felt like a shift in the universe. Ethan did not transform overnight. Growth rarely happens like that. It came in small, uneven steps. Progress in some areas, regression in others. Forward movement followed by friction, like gears finally starting to catch after years of spinning freely without weight. He kept the night shift job longer than anyone expected. 6 weeks passed, then 10, And instead of quitting like he was known for, he adjusted. He complained, yes, but he kept showing up. Supervisors started giving him extra tasks. Basic inventory checks, forklift training, weekend shifts. It was not glory, not spotlight, but it was progress measured in sweat rather than ego. Megan received her final repayment on a Sunday morning, 3 crisp hundreds in an envelope creased from being carried in Ethan's pocket. She stared at it a long time before tucking it away, not smiling, just breathing like she had been waiting to exhale since childhood. It was not the money that mattered. It was the evidence that someone who had always taken was learning how to give back. Then came the call. Ethan phoned me on his dinner break. His voice was quieter than I remembered. Not defeated, just less inflated. He asked how I kept going when I grew up unseen. He asked how I swallowed being overlooked without letting it rot me from the inside. He asked questions I never imagined hearing from him. Questions that sounded like work, reflection, maybe even remorse forming like new muscle. I told him I moved forward because I stopped waiting for applause that would never come. I found worth internally instead of begging for it externally. There was a long pause on the line, a kind of silence that felt like new ground being laid brick by brick. He did not apologize, not explicitly, but acknowledgments sometimes speak louder than sorry. Mom still shields him like he is made of glass, and maybe she needs that illusion more than he does. I stopped trying to dismantle it. People grow on different clocks. Some never do. That is no longer my burden to carry. Dad comes over for family dinners now, Megan too, sometimes with dessert, sometimes with updates about her own life instead of conversations orbiting Ethan. My dining room became a new kind of table. Not flashy, not symbolic, just stable. Ethan joins when he feels steady enough. He eats quietly, listens more than he speaks. Sometimes he brings stories from work. Funny ones, frustrating ones, ones that show he is building identity without pedestal or pedestal collapse. He laughs more now, but softer. He asks how my projects are going. Once he even asked if I could review his resume, just to tighten it up, not to rescue him. That request felt like a mile marker. There are days he slips, late to work, defensive, irritated, and Mom jumps to cushion him. But now Megan calls him out gently, and Dad lets the consequences land without interference. I watch from a healthier distance. I contribute when asked, not when expected. I finally understand that support is not the same as sacrifice. I do not know what our family looks like 5 years from now. Maybe Ethan keeps climbing. Maybe he plateaus. Maybe he falls and gets back up. Maybe he finally sees Megan as more than a fallback. Maybe he learns to thank Dad for boundaries he once hated. But those roads are his to walk, not mine to pave. What I know is this: the middle child is not invisible anymore. I earned my role without sharpening elbows or stepping on throats. I learned that being overlooked is not a life sentence. It is a starting point. All the years of being background noise became fuel, and the golden boy learned that shine means nothing without foundation. Rust flakes, effort builds. For the first time in my life, I feel seen. Not because someone handed me attention, but because I stood where it could no longer be ignored. And if you've read this far, if you felt something in it, then stick around. Subscribe, leave a like, drop a comment telling me what story you want next. I have more to tell. And now I finally have a voice to tell it.